The quiet cost of looking like you made it. There is a strange moment in a person's financial life. It does not happen when they are broke. It happens when they are no longer broke enough to have an excuse. That is when the real test begins. Because poverty, at least in its most obvious form, is easy to recognize. You know when you cannot afford something. You know when the money is not there. You know when the bill hurts. You know when you have to say no because there is no other option. But the more dangerous stage comes later, when you can say yes, when the raise arrives, when the business improves, when the bank account stops looking so fragile, when the world starts offering you a new identity. That is when many people make the mistake that follows them for years. They confuse movement with freedom. They start buying proof. Proof that they are doing better. Proof that they are not the same person anymore. Proof that the old limits no longer apply. Proof that the people who doubted them were wrong. And at first, it feels harmless. A better car, a nicer place, better clothes, better restaurants, better trips, better photos, better conversations, better stories to tell. Nothing extreme. Nothing obviously insane. Just small upgrades, small signs, small declarations. But those small declarations can become a financial trap. Because once your progress needs an audience, your money stops serving only your life. It starts serving your image, and image is expensive. Not because one purchase ruins you, but because image is never satisfied with one purchase. It needs maintenance. It needs consistency. It needs the next signal, the next upgrade, the next thing that says, without words, I am not where I used to be. And that sentence can become a prison. Because the person who needs to prove they escaped something is not fully free yet. They are still negotiating with the past. They are still trying to win an old argument. They are still spending money on people who may not even be watching. That is the quiet cost of looking like you made it. Nobody calls it that. Nobody receives an invoice that says, this month you spent $1,200 trying to feel respected. Nobody gets a bank notification that says, congratulations, you just financed your insecurity for another 30 days. But it happens. It happens in families. It happens in offices. It happens after promotions. It happens after business success. It happens after people survive a difficult childhood. It happens after years of being underestimated. It happens when money finally gives someone the chance to rewrite how they are seen. And that is why this topic is not simple. It would be too easy to say, do not buy expensive things. That is not the point. It would be too easy to say, rich people are quiet. That is also not the point. The deeper question is this. What are you trying to heal with things that can only be paid for but never truly answer you back? Because a lot of spending is not really about the object. It is about the feeling attached to the object. A watch is not just a watch. A car is not just a car. A house is not just a house. A vacation is not just a vacation. Sometimes these things become messages. Messages to the world. Messages to your family. Messages to your old classmates. Messages to an ex. Messages to people who once made you feel invisible. Messages to yourself. And when money becomes a language for pain, the vocabulary gets expensive fast. Because pain does not know when to stop shopping. It always finds another symbol. Another way to say, now do you see me? Now do you respect me? Now do you believe I am worth something? Now, do you understand that I changed? But the world has a short attention span. People notice for a moment. Then they move on. They go back to their own problems, their own comparisons, their own fears, their own need to be seen. And you are left with the payment. That is the unfair deal. The attention disappears. The obligation stays. A person can get 5 minutes of admiration and 5 years of financial pressure. That is a terrible trade. And yet people make it every day. Not because they are stupid. Not because they are bad with money by nature. But because status feels like medicine when you have spent years feeling behind. It feels like oxygen. It feels like arrival. It feels like revenge without having to say anything. And for a moment it works. You walk into the room and people look differently. You post something and people react. You buy something and someone asks about it. You feel a little taller, a little safer, a little more official. As if life finally stamped your progress. But then the feeling fades. And when the feeling fades, the object remains. Then the payment remains. Then the new standard remains. And now you have to keep living at the level you introduced to the world. That is where the trap becomes real. Because the first luxury is not the real problem. The real problem is the new identity that comes with it. Once you present yourself as someone who lives at a certain level, lowering the level feels like public failure. Even if lowering it would be intelligent. even if lowering it would protect you, even if lowering it would give you breathing room, even if lowering it would help you build real wealth. The ego hates going backward, even when backward is actually the way out. So people keep paying, they keep stretching, they keep upgrading, they keep explaining, they keep performing a life that looks better than it feels. And over time, they do not own the life anymore. They are employed by it. The house becomes an employer. The car becomes an employer. The social circle becomes an employer. The lifestyle becomes an employer. The version of success they created becomes an employer. And every month, that employer demands a salary. That is why the most dangerous question in personal finance is not, can I buy it? The most dangerous question is, what version of myself will this purchase force me to keep playing? Because some purchases are not purchases, they are roles. You buy the thing, and then you have to become the kind of person who owns that thing. You have to act like it fits. You have to defend it. You have to justify it. You have to maintain it. You have to keep matching it. And if you are not careful, the object becomes the standard. Then the standard becomes the expectation. Then the expectation becomes the cage. And the cage looks beautiful from the outside. That is what makes it so hard to detect. People do not always ruin their finances by making obviously foolish decisions. Sometimes they ruin their freedom through respectable decisions. A respectable apartment, a respectable car, a respectable school, a respectable wardrobe, a respectable lifestyle, a respectable level of spending that everybody around them understands, applauds, and even expects. And because it looks normal, nobody warns them. Nobody says, be careful. This version of normal might consume the future you are trying to build. Nobody says, you are not upgrading your life. You are raising the monthly price of being yourself. But that is exactly what happens. Every lifestyle has a carrying cost, not just financial, emotional, mental, social. Once your life becomes expensive, your decisions become less free. You cannot quit as easily. You cannot take risks as easily. You cannot wait as easily. You cannot walk away as easily. You cannot say no as easily. And if you cannot say no, your income may be higher, but your freedom is smaller than you think. This is where people confuse income with power. Income is not power if every dollar already has a job before it arrives. Income is not power if the next paycheck is needed to keep the image alive. Income is not power if your lifestyle collapses after one bad month. Income is not power if you have to keep accepting things you hate because your expenses are waiting at home. Power begins when money gives you options. Options to wait. Options to refuse. Options to change. Options to recover. Options to negotiate. Options to stay quiet while you build. That kind of power does not always look impressive. In fact, it often looks boring. It may look like living in a place smaller than what you could technically afford. It may look like driving something that still works. It may look like not upgrading every time you can. It may look like choosing peace over applause. It may look like keeping money invisible. And that is why many people do not choose it, because invisible progress feels emotionally unrewarding at first. You save money and nobody claps. You avoid debt and nobody congratulates you. You invest quietly and nobody asks for the story. You stay in control and it looks like nothing happened. But something did happen. You kept a piece of your future. You did not give it away for a reaction. And that matters. The modern world is built to make invisible progress feel like failure. If nobody can see it, did it count? If nobody liked it, did it happen? If nobody envied it, was it worth it? If nobody said, you are doing well, are you really doing well? That is the psychological battlefield, not the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is easy compared with the pressure to be seen. People know they should save. They know they should avoid unnecessary debt. They know they should invest. They know they should keep some cash. They know they should not spend every raise. Most people are not completely ignorant. The problem is that financial knowledge often loses against emotional hunger. And emotional hunger is subtle. It does not always sound desperate. Sometimes it sounds responsible. I need to look professional. Sometimes it sounds motivational. I am just rewarding myself. Sometimes it sounds mature. I am finally living better. Sometimes it sounds confident. I'm done living small. Sometimes it sounds inspirational. I deserve abundance. And maybe some of that is true. But the question is not whether the sentence sounds good. The question is whether the decision makes your life stronger after the emotion fades. That is the real test. After the excitement, after the compliments, after the photos, after the newness, after the feeling of arrival, are you stronger? Or are you more obligated? Do you have more room or less room? Do you have more peace or more pressure? Do you have more options or a more expensive identity? Because the purchase itself is often less important than what it does to your structure. A thing can look like a reward and behave like a chain. A thing can look like success and behave like rent charged to your future. A thing can look like confidence and actually be insecurity with a receipt. That is why you need a private honesty that does not depend on anybody else. You need to ask yourself questions that nobody can answer for you. Would I still want this if nobody could see it? Would I still choose this if I could not mention it? Would this still matter if it gave me no status? Would I buy this in a city where nobody knew my past? Would I buy this if there were no photo, no reaction, no story, no comparison? These questions cut through the noise, because sometimes the answer is yes. And when the answer is yes, good. Maybe it is real enjoyment. Maybe it is comfort. Maybe it is usefulness. Maybe it is beauty. Maybe it is rest. Maybe it genuinely fits your life. But sometimes the answer is no. And when the answer is no, you have found the hidden customer. It was not you. It was the image of you. It was the imagined audience. It was the old wound. It was the version of yourself still trying to be approved by people who do not pay your bills. That discovery can be uncomfortable, but it can also save you a fortune. Because once you know who is really asking for the purchase, you can decide whether that person should have access to your money. Should your insecurity have direct access to your credit card? Should your old humiliation have permission to choose your car? Should your need for recognition be allowed to design your monthly expenses? Should your fear of looking behind be allowed to decide where you live? These are not small questions. They are the foundation of financial maturity. Because money management is not only about discipline, it is about identity. A person who has no stable identity will keep outsourcing it to objects. A person who cannot feel enough internally will keep renting proof externally. A person who needs witnesses for every improvement will turn progress into performance. And performance, again, is expensive. It requires lighting, costume, audience, continuity. You have to keep the story believable. You have to make sure the outside matches the character. But real wealth does not need to be believable to others. It needs to be functional for you. That is a completely different standard. Looking wealthy asks, what do they think? Being financially strong asks, what can I handle? Looking successful asks, what does this communicate? Being financially strong asks, what does this cost me over time? Looking upgraded asks, will this make me feel above where I was? Being financially strong asks, will this increase or reduce my future choices? Most people ask the first set of questions without noticing. That is why they make decisions that feel good socially but weaken them privately. And private weakness eventually becomes public stress. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. Because life tests structure. It does not test aesthetics. Life does not care how expensive your lifestyle looks. It cares how much room you have when something breaks. It cares whether you can survive a bad month. It cares whether you can wait for a better opportunity. It cares whether you are carrying debt that forces your hand. It cares whether your spending pattern can handle reality. Reality is not impressed by your image. Reality asks for margin. And margin is one of the least glamorous forms of wealth. But it is also one of the most important. Margin is the space between income and panic. Margin is what keeps an emergency from becoming a disaster. Margin is what turns a bad week into a problem instead of a collapse. Margin is what gives you the ability to think. Without margin, every decision becomes urgent. And urgency is expensive. Urgency makes you borrow badly, sell badly, negotiate badly, accept badly, choose badly. Urgency turns small problems into permanent consequences. That is why the person who protects margin is often richer than the person who only protects appearance, even if nobody sees it, especially because nobody sees it. Because the visible life and the strong life are not always the same life. Sometimes they overlap, but often they compete. You may have to choose. Do you want the version of progress people can recognize immediately, or the version that gives you power slowly? Do you want the upgrade that gets comments, or the stability that gives you silence? Do you want a better-looking life, or a life that is harder to break? The answer sounds obvious when stated plainly, but in real life, it is not obvious. Because the better-looking life seduces you now. The harder-to-break life rewards you later. And human beings are not naturally good at choosing later. Later has no applause. Later has no dopamine hit. Later has no photo. Later does not defend your ego at dinner. Later does not make the people who doubted you suddenly look impressed. Later is quiet, but later is where freedom lives. That is why people who build real wealth often have to endure a season where they look less successful than they are. This is not because they hate pleasure, not because they are morally superior, not because they are pretending to be humble, but because they understand sequence. First, build the base, then upgrade the visible parts. First, create resilience, then expand comfort. First, buy options, then buy symbols if you still want them. First, make sure the lifestyle rests on something solid. Then enjoy what the foundation can actually support. Most people reverse the order. They buy the symbol first and hope the foundation catches up later. They upgrade the life first and hope income keeps rising. They commit to the payment first and hope discipline appears. They choose the apartment, the car, the trips, the social identity, and then try to build wealth around what remains. But wealth is hard to build with leftovers, especially when the leftovers are already emotionally claimed. So the person keeps waiting. Next month I will save. After this expense. After this trip. After this year. After the next raise. After things calm down. But things rarely calm down by themselves. A lifestyle, once inflated, does not politely shrink. It defends itself. It finds reasons to stay. It calls itself normal. It calls itself deserved. It calls itself necessary. It calls itself who you are now. And if you believe it, you will keep feeding it. That is why lifestyle inflation is not just a financial issue. It is an identity issue. The moment you say, "This is who I am now," every reduction feels like self-betrayal, even if the reduction would save you. So the wiser move is to avoid turning every upgrade into identity. Let comfort be comfort. Let tools be tools. Let beauty be beauty. Let pleasure be pleasure. But do not let any of them become proof of your worth. Because the moment a purchase becomes proof of your worth, you will defend it even when it hurts you. You will keep it longer than you should. You will pay more than you planned. You will justify what you know is heavy. You will resent anyone who questions it. Because they are not just questioning a purchase. They are questioning the self-image attached to it. And that is why financial conversations can become so emotional. People say they are discussing money, but often they are defending identity. They are defending the story that says, "I made it. I deserve this. I am not behind. I belong here. I am no longer the person I used to be." Those stories matter, but they can become very expensive if they are never examined. Because maybe you did make it. Maybe you do deserve good things. Maybe you are not behind. Maybe you do belong. Maybe you are not the person you used to be. But none of that requires you to weaken your future to prove it. That is the line. Enjoying life is not the enemy. Proving your life is. Buying quality is not the enemy. Buying validation is. Wanting beauty is not the enemy. Needing witnesses is. Improving your standard of living is not the enemy. Raising the cost of your ego is. And the cost of ego is usually hidden until pressure arrives. Pressure reveals everything. Pressure reveals whether the purchase was comfortable or heavy. Pressure reveals whether the lifestyle was yours or borrowed. Pressure reveals whether you had wealth or only appearance. Pressure reveals whether your money bought freedom or performance. Because performance collapses when the audience stops paying. And in personal finance, you are the one who keeps paying for the audience. That is the absurd part. You pay so other people can briefly believe a story about you. Then they leave, and you keep paying. So before the next upgrade, before the next proof, before the next visible signal, pause. Not forever, just long enough to ask, who is asking for this? My real life or my image? My peace or my insecurity? My future or my need to be seen today? That pause may be the beginning of a different financial life. Because the opposite of impulsive spending is not misery. It is authorship. It is the ability to write your life with intention instead of letting old wounds write checks. And when you start living with that kind of authorship, your choices change. Not all at once, but they change. You may still buy nice things, but fewer of them are bought as emotional armor. You may still travel, but less to prove that you are living and more to actually live. You may still dress well, but less to ask for respect and more because it fits who you are. You may still improve your home, but less to impress visitors and more to support the life inside it. The outside may not become dramatically smaller, but the reason changes. And when the reason changes, the pressure changes. That is where freedom begins. Not when you stop spending. When spending stops being a desperate language. Not when you stop spending. When spending stops being a desperate language. Because money is always saying something. Sometimes it says, I value my time. Sometimes it says, I want comfort. Sometimes it says, This tool helps me build. Sometimes it says, I want to share something with people I love. Sometimes it says, I can enjoy this without destroying my stability. That is healthy. But sometimes money says something else. Sometimes it says, please notice me. Sometimes it says, please respect me. Sometimes it says, please believe I am not behind. Sometimes it says, please forget the version of me you once knew. Sometimes it says, please confirm that I finally matter. And that is where the danger begins. Because if your money is constantly asking for emotional confirmation, your spending will never feel finished. There will always be another room to enter, another circle to impress, another person to prove wrong, another version of success to imitate, another symbol that feels necessary. And the market understands this better than most people do. The market does not only sell products, it sells belonging. It sells identity. It sells relief from comparison. It sells the feeling of arrival. It sells you an escape from the humiliation of feeling ordinary. And that is why the most profitable customer is not always the richest person. It is often the person who feels they have something to prove. Because a person with something to prove is easy to move. Show them a symbol, and they imagine status. Show them a lifestyle, and they imagine rescue. Show them a luxury, and they imagine respect. Show them a payment plan, and they imagine a new self. And suddenly, the question is no longer, does this fit my financial life? The question becomes, can I afford to keep feeling like I am not enough? That is a dangerous question, because the answer will almost always become a purchase, or a loan, or a commitment, or an upgrade, or a lifestyle change that pretends to solve something deeper than money. This is why some people start earning more and become less free. From the outside, that sounds impossible. How can more income produce less freedom? But it happens all the time. Because income increases the size of the playground, it does not automatically improve the rules of the game. If your rule is, I must prove myself, more money only gives you more ways to prove. If your rule is, I must not look behind, more money gives you more expensive ways to avoid shame. If your rule is, people must see my progress, more money turns your life into a stage. And a stage needs constant production. The lighting must stay on, the clothes must match, the setting must improve, the character must remain believable. That is exhausting, and it is financially brutal, because every public version of success creates private obligations. People see the vacation. They do not see the credit card balance. People see the car. They do not see the insurance, the maintenance, the stress, the monthly pressure. People see the house. They do not see the repairs, the property taxes, the furniture, the fear of losing it. People see the dinner. They do not see the budget that disappeared. People see the upgrade. They do not see the opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is one of the most invisible forces in a financial life. It is not only what you paid. It is what that money can no longer become. The emergency fund it did not build. The investment it did not enter. The debt it did not reduce. The time it did not buy. The risk it did not protect you from. The option it did not create. Every dollar has a future, and when you spend it to impress, that future changes. Maybe not dramatically in one moment, but repeatedly, quietly, again and again. That is how people lose years without noticing. Not in one catastrophic mistake. In hundreds of small votes for appearance over freedom. A little more rent than necessary. A little more car than needed. A little more restaurant than comfortable. A little more fashion than real use. A little more technology than function. A little more travel than the budget can carry. A little more generosity to avoid looking selfish. A little more participation in social plans that do not fit. A little more spending because saying no feels embarrassing. Each one seems manageable. Together, they form a lifestyle that eats the future. And here's the cruel part. The person may genuinely believe they are doing well because they are doing what successful people seem to do. They go where successful people go. They buy what successful people buy. They speak the language of success. They move through spaces that look like progress. But imitation of success is not the same as structure. A costume is not a foundation. A receipt is not wealth. A lifestyle is not freedom. And if the structure underneath is weak, the performance eventually becomes heavier than the person can carry. This is why the phrase, I deserve it, must be handled carefully. Sometimes it is true. You do deserve rest. You do deserve beauty. You do deserve comfort. You do deserve moments that make life feel full. But the question is, do you deserve the object? Or do you deserve the peace that the object is pretending to offer? Because if what you really deserve is peace, buying more pressure is a strange way to get it. If what you really deserve is dignity, buying approval is a fragile substitute. If what you really deserve is freedom, raising your fixed expenses may be the opposite of what your soul is asking for. That is the contradiction. Many people reward themselves in ways that punish their future. They call it self-love, but it behaves like self-betrayal. Not always, not every time, but often enough to matter. You work hard, you feel tired, you feel unseen, you feel like life owes you something, so you buy. You upgrade, you say yes, you treat yourself, and for a moment, it feels good. The problem is not the moment. The problem is what the moment costs after the feeling is gone. A reward that becomes a burden was not really a reward. It was a loan from your future emotional stability. And one day the future collects. It collects through stress, through limited options, through anxiety, through staying in jobs you hate, through needing every paycheck, through not being able to take a chance, through watching opportunities pass because your cash is trapped in your image. That is not abundance. That is decorative dependence. And decorative dependence is everywhere. People decorating a dependency on income with objects that make the dependency look successful. People decorating debt with taste. People decorating insecurity with brands. People decorating pressure with lifestyle. People decorating exhaustion with trips they cannot truly afford. People decorating fear with a house that signals stability but removes flexibility. And because the decoration looks beautiful, the dependence is harder to admit. Nobody wants to say, I built a life that looks like progress but feels like pressure. But many people live there. They feel it when they check their accounts. They feel it when a payment is due. They feel it when an emergency appears. They feel it when they want to leave a situation but cannot. They feel it when they realize their income is high, but their options are few. That feeling is information. Do not ignore it. It is not only stress. It is your financial structure telling the truth. And sometimes the truth is, you bought too much life for the foundation you had. That sentence may sound harsh, but it is useful. Because once you see it, you can stop expanding the visible part and start strengthening the base. This is where quiet wealth begins, not with looking poor, not with pretending to be humble, not with refusing all pleasure. Quiet wealth begins when the base matters more than the signal, when liquidity matters more than applause, when control matters more than admiration, when your ability to breathe matters more than the story others tell about you. This is not about hating status. Status exists. Humans notice it. Humans respond to it. It affects opportunities. It affects how people are treated. It affects confidence. It affects networks. Pretending status does not matter is naive, but letting status rule your financial life is dangerous. The goal is not to become blind to status. The goal is to stop worshiping it. Use image when it is useful. Do not become its servant. Dress well if it helps your work. Do not let clothing become a substitute for self-respect. Live in a decent place if it improves your life. Do not let housing become a monument to your ego. Buy reliable tools. Do not buy expensive props. Enjoy beautiful experiences. Do not use them as proof that your life is worth admiring. That distinction is everything, because the same purchase can come from strength or from weakness. The same car can be a tool or a trophy. The same trip can be rest or performance. The same watch can be taste or insecurity. The same apartment can be comfort or theater. The same dinner can be pleasure or social survival. Nobody else can always tell the difference, but you can. You know the energy behind the purchase. You know whether you are calm or tense. You know whether you are choosing or reacting. You know whether you are enjoying or proving. You know whether you would still want it without the audience. That private knowledge is where real financial change begins. Because as long as you keep lying to yourself, the budget will never be enough. You will move numbers around. You will blame prices. You will blame the economy. You will blame bad luck. You will blame obligations. And yes, some of those things may be real. Life is expensive. Inflation is real. Housing can be brutal. Wages do not always keep up. Emergencies happen. Family responsibilities matter. But even inside all of that, there is still a difference between necessary pressure and chosen pressure. You must learn the difference. Necessary pressure is the cost of survival, responsibility, health, shelter, transportation, and basic life. Chosen pressure is the cost of an identity you do not actually need to maintain. Necessary pressure may require compassion. Chosen pressure requires honesty. And a lot of people confuse the two because it protects their ego. They say, everything is expensive, when part of the truth is, my life is expensive because I kept upgrading the parts people can see. They say, I do not make enough, when part of the truth is, I do not keep enough. They say, I have no choice, when part of the truth is, I do not want to lose the image I created. That does not mean the whole problem is personal. It means your personal decisions still matter. And that should not make you feel attacked. It should make you feel capable, because if every problem is outside you, you have no lever. But if even 10% is inside your patterns, that 10% can become the beginning of freedom. You do not need total control to make progress. You need an honest lever. And the most powerful lever here is simple. Stop converting every improvement in income into an improvement in appearance. Let some of your progress stay invisible. Let some of it become savings. Let some of it become investments. Let some of it reduce debt. Let some of it create margin. Let some of it become time. Let some of it become future options. Let some of it stay quiet. This will feel strange if you are used to visible progress. You may feel like nothing changed, but something changed. The money stayed. And money that stays can work. Money that stays can protect. Money that stays can compound. Money that stays can give you a different relationship with tomorrow. That is not small. That is the beginning of a different life. But you have to survive the emotional gap. The gap between doing the right thing and receiving no applause for it. That gap defeats many people. They start saving, but it feels boring. They start investing, but the amounts feel small. They avoid lifestyle inflation, but others seem to be living more. They stay disciplined, but no one notices. They build slowly, but comparison makes them feel late. So they quit. They go back to visible rewards, because visible rewards feel like proof. Invisible wealth feels like faith, at least at the beginning. You are trusting a process that does not entertain you every day. You are trusting that future freedom matters more than present recognition. You are trusting that small repeated choices can become something large. You are trusting that being underestimated is not the same as failing. That trust takes maturity, and maturity often looks unimpressive while it is being built. That is why people who truly want freedom must become comfortable being temporarily misunderstood. Comfortable not correcting every assumption. Comfortable not showing every gain. Comfortable not upgrading every time they can. Comfortable letting other people think they are moving slower. Comfortable choosing a life that feels better than it photographs. This is not easy, because human beings want witnesses. We want our effort to be seen. We want our transformation to be noticed. We want the story to be recognized, and there is nothing wrong with that. The danger begins when the need to be seen starts making financial decisions for us. Then the witness becomes too expensive. Then the applause becomes a creditor. Then admiration becomes a monthly bill. And eventually, you realize you are not living for what you value. You are living to maintain what your audience expects. That audience may be real or imagined. Sometimes it is not even people around you. Sometimes it is a mental courtroom, a room full of ghosts, old classmates, old relatives, old partners, old critics, old versions of yourself, people who once made you feel small, people who may not care anymore, people who may not remember what they said, people who are not watching, but you keep spending as if they are. That is one of the saddest parts of status spending. You can spend real money fighting imaginary trials. You can buy real objects for symbolic victories. You can lose real freedom trying to win approval from people who have already left the room. And that is why healing matters in finance, not in a soft, decorative way, in a practical way. Unhealed shame is expensive. Unhealed comparison is expensive. Unhealed rejection is expensive. Unhealed insecurity is expensive. Unhealed poverty memories can become expensive if they turn every purchase into proof that you escaped. This is not therapy language for decoration. It is financial reality. Because whatever you refuse to understand emotionally, you may end up financing materially. You pay for what you will not face, sometimes with money, sometimes with years, sometimes with relationships, sometimes with freedom. So yes, learn about investing. Learn about interest. Learn about assets. Learn about taxes. Learn about business. Learn about income. But also learn your triggers. Learn what makes you overspend. Learn what makes you compare. Learn who makes you feel inferior. Learn which environments pressure you to perform. Learn what kind of praise you crave. Learn what kind of criticism makes you want to prove yourself. That knowledge may save you more money than a budget template, because a budget tells money where to go, but self-knowledge tells you why it keeps escaping. And if you do not know why it escapes, it will always find a new door. Today, through shopping. Tomorrow, through food. Next month, through travel. Later, through housing. Then through gifts. Then through generosity that is actually fear of rejection. then through investments that are really gambling with a sophisticated name. The pattern moves, the emotion remains. So you must find the emotion. Name it, challenge it, build a system around it. For example, if you overspend when you feel behind, reduce comparison triggers. If you overspend when you are tired, stop making purchase decisions at night. If you overspend to impress a specific group, question whether that group is worth the cost. If you overspend after getting paid, automate savings before your ego sees the money. If you overspend after criticism, create a waiting period before buying anything that signals status. If you overspend because you say yes too easily, practice saying, "That does not fit my plan right now." Not, "I am broke." Not, "I cannot." Not, "I wish I could." Just, "That does not fit my plan right now." That sentence is powerful because it shifts the frame. You are not confessing weakness. You are stating direction. And direction is one of the most important financial assets you can have. A person without direction spends according to mood. A person with direction spends according to design. Mood is unstable. Design is stronger. Mood says, "I want to feel better now." Design says, "I know what I am building." Mood says, "They will think I am falling behind." Design says, "I do not report to their timeline." Mood says, "I deserve this." Design says, "I deserve freedom too." That last sentence matters. I deserve freedom too. Because people often use "I deserve it" only for consumption. But you also deserve not to be trapped. You deserve not to be anxious every month. You deserve not to depend on approval. You deserve not to work forever just to maintain a lifestyle that impresses people who do not know your stress. You deserve a future that is not paying for every impulse your present self refused to question. That is not deprivation. That is respect. Respect for your future self. Respect for your time. Respect for your energy. Respect for the part of you that wants more than applause. And when that respect becomes stronger than your need to prove, your financial life changes. You start looking at money differently. You stop seeing it only as permission to consume. You start seeing it as stored choice, stored patience, stored protection, stored dignity, stored time, stored ability to say no. And once you see money that way, it becomes harder to waste it on weak applause. Not impossible. You are still human, but harder. Because now you know what you are trading away. You are not just trading money for a thing. You are trading future choice for present signal. Sometimes that trade is worth it. Often, it is not. The key is to know which is which, and that requires slowing down. The status economy wants speed. It wants you to react, to compare, to desire, to click, to upgrade, to join, to prove, to show, to keep up. It wants no pause between insecurity and payment. But wealth loves the pause. The pause is where impulse loses power. The pause is where the story becomes visible. The pause is where you hear the real motive. The pause is where you can say, "This is not a need. This is a trigger. This is not taste. This is comparison. This is not a reward. This is emotional anesthesia. This is not ambition. This is fear of being seen as ordinary." That pause can save thousands. Over years, it can save far more than that. It can save the entire direction of your life. Because most financial disasters are not sudden. They are prepared quietly by repeated decisions that felt normal at the time. A life becomes heavy, one justified expense at a time, one emotional purchase at a time, one upgrade at a time, one only this once at a time, one everybody does it at a time, one I deserve it at a time, one I will fix it later at a time. Then later arrives, and later is expensive. Later has interest. Later has fewer options. Later has less patience. Later asks why the money that could have protected you was used to decorate you. That is a painful question. But if you ask it early enough, it can become a gift, because you do not have to wait until collapse to change. You can change at the level of the next decision. The next upgrade you delay. The next payment you refuse. The next comparison you do not obey. The next raise you do not fully absorb into lifestyle. The next bonus you do not turn into proof. The next conversation where you do not reveal everything. The next moment where you let someone underestimate you and do not correct them with spending. That last one is difficult, but it is powerful. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you could be doing more. Let them think your life is normal. Let them think you are not as far along as you are. Let them think whatever they want. Their perception is not your financial plan. And if you cannot tolerate being underestimated, you will pay a lot to be recognized. Maybe too much. Recognition is seductive, but it is not the same as freedom. Sometimes the freest person in the room is not the most impressive one. It is the one who can leave, the one who can wait, the one who can say no, the one who is not terrified of losing an image, the one whose life is not built on applause, the one who has fewer visible trophies and more invisible options. That person may not dominate the conversation, but they may own more of their life. And owning your life is more valuable than looking like you won one evening. That is why the quiet path matters. It teaches you to value what does not immediately perform. Cash reserves, low fixed expenses, useful skills, debt avoidance, steady investment, selective spending, clear priorities, emotional independence. These things are not flashy, but they are load-bearing. They hold the house, not the house you show people. The inner house, the one your life actually stands on. And if that inner house is weak, the outer house does not matter much. You can decorate instability. You can photograph instability. You can get compliments for instability. But you still live inside instability. And if you live inside instability long enough, eventually the decoration stops helping. You want peace. You want room. You want to stop performing. You want your money to stay. You want your work to mean more than survival with better packaging. That desire is healthy. But to get there, you must be willing to disappoint the part of you that wanted visible revenge. You must tell that part. I understand why you wanted to be seen. I understand why you wanted proof. I understand why you wanted them to know. But we are not going to spend our future trying to win old approval. That is not weakness. That is growth. Because the younger, wounded, more reactive version of you may have been necessary at one point. Maybe that version pushed you. Maybe it helped you survive. Maybe it made you ambitious. Maybe it gave you energy. But it cannot be the chief financial officer of your life forever. It is too emotional. It buys too fast. It wants to win too many imaginary arguments. It confuses being admired with being safe. At some point, a calmer version has to take over. A version that says, we are not proving today. We are building. We are not buying a character. We are buying freedom. We are not making the outside louder than the inside can support. We are not turning every wound into a bill. That is the shift. And once that shift happens, even your ambition becomes cleaner. You still want more, but not because you need to erase yourself. You want more options, more time, more ability to choose, more capacity to help without drowning, more room to create, more independence, more peace, more life. That ambition does not require as much noise. It can move quietly. It can compound. It can take years without needing to perform every step. It can build something real. And when something real is being built, you do not need every person to understand the construction site. Some things look unfinished while they are becoming strong. Your financial life may look unimpressive while it is becoming resilient. That is okay. A foundation is never the most beautiful part of a building. But without it, beauty becomes danger. So build the foundation, even when it is boring, especially when it is boring, because the boring part may be what saves you later. The transfer you automate, the debt you avoid, the fixed cost you refuse, the purchase you delay, the urge you question, the income increase you keep instead of display, the private decision that nobody applauds. Those are not dramatic, but they are the bricks, and a free life is made of many unglamorous bricks. This is why the idea of looking successful can be so dangerous. It feels like victory because it gives you visible evidence. But real progress often begins before there is any visible evidence at all. In fact, some of the most important financial progress looks like nothing from the outside. You did not buy the expensive car. Nothing to show. You did not upgrade the apartment. Nothing to show. You did not take the luxury trip. Nothing to show. You did not replace something that still works. Nothing to show. You did not reveal how much you are saving or investing. Nothing to show. But that nothing may be exactly where your future is being built. The outside sees absence. Your future receives protection. And that is difficult to appreciate in a culture trained to respect visible signals. People understand spending. They understand new things. They understand upgrades. They understand lifestyle. They understand photos. They understand what can be seen. They do not always understand restraint. They do not always understand margin. They do not always understand delayed freedom. They do not always understand why someone with more money would choose not to make the money visible. But you do not need them to understand. You need your numbers to understand. You need your future to understand. You need your peace to understand. You need your life to become less fragile. Because fragility is the hidden enemy here. Not spending, not pleasure. not beauty. Fragility. A fragile financial life is one that depends on too many perfect conditions. Perfect income, perfect health, perfect employment, perfect clients, perfect markets, perfect relationships, perfect timing, perfect emotional control. But life does not remain perfect. It interrupts. It changes. It surprises. It breaks things. It delays money. It creates emergencies. It exposes weak structures. And when a fragile life meets reality, the image does not protect you. The image might even make things worse, because now you not only have a problem, you have a problem you're embarrassed to admit. You have a lifestyle that says one thing and a bank account that says another. You have people assuming you are fine because you taught them to assume that. You have an ego that does not want to ask for help. You have payments that do not care about your pride. That is a lonely place, and many people enter it slowly. They do not notice the transition. They just keep accepting a little more pressure as normal, a little more monthly obligation, a little more dependence on the next paycheck, a little more need to keep income high, a little more fear of stopping, a little more shame around simplifying. And then one day, they look around and realize their life became too expensive to be honest, too expensive to rest, too expensive to change, too expensive to leave, too expensive to admit the truth. That is when appearance becomes a trap. Not because having nice things is wrong, but because the nice things became guards at the door of your own freedom. They keep you inside. They remind you what must be paid. They remind you what must be maintained. They remind you what people expect. They remind you what you are afraid to lose. And the strangest part is that the person may still look successful. That is why this trap lasts so long. If failure looked like failure immediately, people would change sooner. But financial fragility can wear expensive clothes. It can drive well. It can live in a nice neighborhood. It can post beautiful photos. It can speak confidently. It can appear generous. It can be admired. Until pressure arrives. Pressure is the audit. Pressure removes the decoration. Pressure asks, what is really yours? What can you really carry? How long can you breathe without the next payment? How much of your life is choice and how much is obligation? That is why every person who wants financial freedom needs to build for pressure, not applause. Applause is easy when things are visible. Pressure is where the truth shows up. So the question becomes, what kind of life are you building under pressure? A life that collapses if income pauses? A life that panics if an emergency appears? A life that cannot tolerate a simpler season? A life that must keep performing even when you are exhausted? Or a life with enough quiet strength to absorb impact? The second life may look less exciting, but it is far more valuable because it gives you a rare luxury, not having to be desperate. Desperation is one of the most expensive states in the world. When you are desperate, you accept bad terms. When you are desperate, you sell too early. When you are desperate, you borrow badly. When you are desperate, you negotiate from weakness. When you are desperate, you say yes to things that cost more than money. And the painful part is that many desperate situations were prepared long before the emergency. Prepared by lifestyle, prepared by ego, prepared by fixed expenses, prepared by debt, prepared by the inability to let progress remain invisible. This is why quiet financial decisions matter. They are not glamorous, but they reduce the odds that future you will be forced into desperation. A lower fixed expense is not just a smaller bill. It is a wider doorway. A cash reserve is not just unused money. It is emotional oxygen. A delayed purchase is not always denial. It may be protection. An investment made quietly is not boring. It is a future employee that may one day work when you do not want to. And saying no to status spending is not failure. It is refusing to rent an identity you cannot afford to maintain. That phrase matters, renting an identity, because a lot of visible success is exactly that. You rent the feeling, through payments, through credit, through constant participation, through ongoing maintenance, through repeated signals. You feel like the person for a while. But if the payments stop, the identity starts to shake. That is not ownership. That is rental. Owning your life is different. Owning your life means your identity is not constantly threatened by simplification. You can downgrade without feeling erased. You can say no without feeling inferior. You can be underestimated without panicking. You can enjoy luxury without needing it to define you. You can have money without turning money into a public personality. That is freedom. And it is much harder than it sounds, because the world pushes you toward public personality. Everything becomes a brand. Your clothes, your home, your food, your trips, your opinions, your routines, your body, your income. your productivity, your happiness, even your rest. People are encouraged to package life as evidence. Evidence that they are well. Evidence that they are desirable. Evidence that they are growing. Evidence that they are winning. And when life becomes evidence, spending becomes part of the testimony. You are no longer just living. You are proving. Proving is exhausting because every proof expires. The thing that proved success last year becomes normal this year. The lifestyle that impressed people before becomes expected. The symbol that made you feel ahead eventually becomes the baseline. So you need more. Not because your needs changed, because the story needs fresh evidence. That is why status spending escalates. It is not satisfied because it is not feeding a real need. It is feeding a moving comparison. And moving comparisons cannot be filled. They can only be interrupted. Interrupted by awareness. Interrupted by limits. Interrupted by a new definition of success. Interrupted by the decision to stop letting the outside world price your self-worth. This is where personal finance becomes personal, deeply personal. Because at some point, you have to decide what success means when nobody is watching. Not what it means on a screen. Not what it means at a reunion. Not what it means in front of people who once dismissed you. Not what it means to your social circle. To you, what does success mean when nobody claps? Maybe it means having 6 months of expenses saved. Maybe it means being debt-free. Maybe it means being able to help your family without destroying yourself. Maybe it means being able to leave a toxic job. Maybe it means working less. Maybe it means owning a small home that does not own you back. Maybe it means traveling without returning to anxiety. Maybe it means building a business slowly. Maybe it means investing consistently without needing to brag. Maybe it means waking up without financial panic. Notice how few of these require performance. They may require discipline. They may require patience. They may require sacrifice. They may require planning, but they do not require applause, and that is what makes them powerful. Because anything that requires applause is vulnerable to the crowd. If the crowd changes, your self-worth changes. If the crowd ignores you, your motivation drops. If the crowd admires someone else, your peace breaks. That is a fragile way to live. Quiet success removes the crowd from the center. Not completely. We are human. We care about people. We want recognition. But the crowd stops being the steering wheel. It becomes background noise. Your direction comes from somewhere else, from your values, your numbers, your goals, your responsibilities, your future, your real desires, not the desires inserted into you by comparison. That distinction can change how you spend immediately. For example, imagine receiving a raise. The common pattern is to upgrade quickly. Better apartment, better car, better restaurants, better trips, a more expensive version of normal. And maybe some of that is fine. But what if the first question after a raise was not, what can I finally buy? What if it was, how much of this raise can I keep invisible? That question alone can change years of your life. Keep part of it invisible. Before the world claims it, before your lifestyle absorbs it, before family expectations expand, before your ego creates a list, before every desire becomes reasonable because income rose. Keep part of it invisible. Let it become savings. Let it become debt reduction. Let it become investments. Let it become a future escape route. Let it become quiet power. Then, with what remains, enjoy something if you want. But do not give the entire raise to the visible life. That is how people earn more and still remain stuck. Their income increases, but none of the increase becomes freedom. It becomes a nicer version of the same dependence. And dependence with better decoration is still dependence. This is why fixed expenses deserve special respect. A one-time purchase can be foolish, but it ends. A fixed expense joins your life. It moves in. It sits at the table. It waits every month. It shapes your decisions. It reduces your ability to adapt. That is why increasing fixed expenses for status is one of the most dangerous moves. Not because you should never improve your living conditions. Of course you can, but you must understand the seriousness of permanent commitments. A fancy dinner is a moment. A high rent is a structure. An expensive outfit is a purchase. A car payment is a structure. A vacation is a memory. A mortgage beyond your comfort is a structure. Structures matter because they decide how much freedom survives after your emotions leave. And emotions always leave. The excitement of the new place fades. The excitement of the new car fades. The excitement of the new status fades. But the structure remains. So before you add structure, ask, will this still make sense when the excitement is gone? Will this still support my life in a bad month? Will this still feel worth it when nobody is impressed anymore? Will this still leave me room to invest, rest, and choose? If the answer is no, Be careful. You may be building a beautiful trap. And beautiful traps are the hardest to escape because people compliment them. That is another painful truth. Sometimes people encourage your worst financial decisions because the decision looks like success. They congratulate the house that will suffocate you. They admire the car that will pressure you. They like the trip that will follow you home as debt. They praise the lifestyle that makes you less free. Not because they hate you, because they see the surface. They respond to the symbol. They do not see the full cost. And that means you cannot outsource financial wisdom to public reaction. Public reaction is not a financial advisor. Likes are not a balance sheet. Compliments are not liquidity. Admiration is not cash flow. Envy is not freedom. You need a private standard stronger than public approval. A standard that says, I will not accept applause that weakens me. I will not buy admiration with future anxiety. I will not make my life heavier just because the heaviness looks elegant. I will not confuse being seen with being free. That standard is not always easy to hold, especially when you are surrounded by people playing the opposite game. If your circle measures progress by visible spending, restraint will feel strange. If your family believes success must be displayed, discretion may look like failure. If your workplace rewards image, simplicity may feel risky. If your friends socialize through expensive habits, boundaries may feel like exclusion. That is why your environment matters. Some environments constantly tax your identity. They make you pay to belong. Not directly, not always openly, but through expectations. Where you go, what you wear, what you drive, what you order, where you live, how you celebrate, how much you reveal, how often you participate. If belonging requires constant financial performance, you need to ask whether the belonging is worth the cost. Because some groups are not communities. They are subscription plans for insecurity. You keep paying so you do not feel left out. You keep spending so nobody questions your level. You keep joining so your absence does not reveal limits. You keep performing so the group keeps recognizing you. But recognition bought this way is fragile. The moment you stop paying, you may discover how thin the connection was. And that can hurt, but it can also free you. Because you realize you do not want a life where every relationship requires a receipt. Real connection should not depend entirely on your ability to keep up. Real respect should not require you to constantly demonstrate purchasing power. Real friendship should not make your financial goals feel embarrassing. If every honest boundary threatens the bond may not be as safe as you thought. This does not mean cutting everyone off. It means noticing the cost of belonging. Some people help you become freer. Others help you become more expensive. Choose carefully. Because your circle can either protect your future or consume it. And sometimes the most financially intelligent move is not a stock, not a side hustle, not a budget trick. It is changing who gets access to your insecurity, who gets to comment on your life, who gets to define what is normal, who gets to make you feel behind, who gets to pressure your spending. That is not financial advice in the traditional sense, but it affects money deeply. Because money follows attention, and attention follows environment. If your attention is constantly placed on comparison, your money will eventually follow. If your attention is placed on freedom, your money has a chance to follow that instead. So protect your attention. Protect what you watch. Protect who you compare yourself to. Protect the stories you consume. Protect the lifestyle images you let become standards. Protect your mental reference point, because your reference point determines what feels like enough. And enough is one of the most powerful financial concepts in the world. Without enough, no number saves you. Without enough, every achievement becomes temporary. Without enough, every level becomes a waiting room for the next level. Without enough, you can increase income and still feel poor. Not poor in money, poor in peace. But enough does not mean giving up. It means having a floor. A point where you can say, this is good. This supports my life. This does not need to impress everyone. This is not perfect, but it is enough for this season. From that place, ambition becomes healthier. You can still grow, but not because you are running from shame. You can still build, but not because you hate your current self. You can still upgrade, but not because the world must validate your existence. Enough gives ambition a stable ground. Without enough, ambition becomes hunger. And hunger will eat everything, including your future. That is why some people with modest incomes appear calmer than people with high incomes. Not because money does not matter. Money matters, but because peace is not produced only by income. Peace comes from the relationship between income, expectations, obligations, identity, and desire. If expectations grow faster than income, pressure grows. If obligations grow faster than assets, fragility grows. If identity depends on spending, anxiety grows. If desire has no boundary, no income feels enough. So the goal is not simply make more money. The goal is make more money without becoming easier to control. Make more money without becoming addicted to proof. Make more money without letting every raise become a cage. Make more money while protecting enough. That is a more advanced game. And fewer people play it, because it requires rejecting a socially approved mistake. The mistake of looking better before becoming stronger. The mistake of upgrading the shell before strengthening the center. The mistake of making life more expensive before making it more resilient. The mistake of letting the world see progress before that progress has roots. Roots matter. Roots are boring. Roots are invisible. But roots decide whether the tree survives wind. A life without roots can look green for a while. It can photograph well. It can impress from a distance. But when conditions change, it falls. So build roots. Build low fixed costs. Build savings. Build skill. Build reputation that does not depend only on display. Build relationships that do not require performance. Build health. Build patience. Build the ability to wait. Build the ability to say no. Build a life that does not need constant external confirmation. That is the kind of wealth people often discover too late. They chase visible success for years. Then one day they realize they did not want the visible part as much as they wanted relief. Relief from fear. Relief from dependence. Relief from constant proving. Relief from being trapped. Relief from needing every month to go perfectly. And the irony is that many visible purchases delayed exactly that relief. The thing bought to feel successful became the thing that postponed freedom. That is why this conversation matters. It is not anti-ambition. It is anti-fake liberation. It is against the version of success that makes you less free while convincing you that you finally arrived. Because arriving should feel lighter, not heavier. If your success makes every month more terrifying, question it. If your upgrade makes you less able to choose, question it. If your reward punishes your future, question it. If your new level requires constant anxiety to maintain, question it. Maybe it is not success. Maybe it is a luxury costume for financial fear. And you deserve better than that. You deserve a life that does not need to lie through objects. You deserve enjoyment that does not come with hidden panic. You deserve ambition that does not feed on humiliation. You deserve money that serves your life, not your performance. But deserving it is not enough. You have to design for it. You have to choose what stays invisible. You have to choose what does not get upgraded yet. You have to choose which expenses deserve permanence. You have to choose which people do not get access to your financial details. You have to choose which desires are real and which are just wounds wearing expensive clothes. That last phrase is important. Some desires are wounds wearing expensive clothes. They look refined. They look mature. They look like taste. They look like ambition. But under the surface, they are old pain asking for a purchase. And if you do not learn to recognize them, you will keep calling every expensive wound a dream. Not every dream deserves funding. Some dreams are not dreams. They are compensation. They are revenge. They are insecurity with better branding. A real dream usually expands life. A false dream often traps life. A real dream can survive private pursuit. A false dream needs an audience. A real dream makes you more alive. A false dream makes you more dependent on being admired. So ask yourself, would I still want this dream if nobody praised it? Would I still want this life if nobody envied it? Would I still choose this path if it looked ordinary from the outside? Would I still build this if I had to do it quietly? If the answer is yes, pay attention. That may be real. If the answer is no, pay attention too. That may be performance. And performance should not control your finances. It can have a small budget, maybe, but not the steering wheel. Because once performance steers, it never drives toward enough. It drives toward more signal, more proof, more comparison, more pressure, more expense, more fragility. Freedom is usually in the other direction. Less need to explain, less need to impress, less dependence on reaction, less lifestyle inflation, less emotional leakage, less fear of being ordinary, more margin, more clarity, more ownership, more patience, more quiet strength. This is not the glamorous path, but it is the path where your life slowly becomes yours again. And that may be the real point of wealth. Not to become untouchable, not to become superior, not to make people feel small, not to collect symbols, but to become less owned by fear, less owned by debt, less owned by comparison, less owned by expectations, less owned by the opinions of people who do not live with your consequences. A person who is less owned moves differently. They do not need to announce every win. They do not need to turn every raise into proof. They do not need to join every expensive plan. They do not need to defend every decision. They do not need to buy respect from unstable places. They can simply build, quietly, consistently, with fewer witnesses than the ego would prefer, and more peace than the image could ever provide. That is the trade most people do not see. You are always choosing between something. Even when it feels like you are only buying a thing, you are choosing between futures. One future has more visible proof. The other has more quiet power. One future gives the ego something to show. The other gives your life something to stand on. One future answers an insecurity today. The other protects you from being cornered tomorrow. And the painful part is that the first future usually feels better in the moment. It is faster. It is louder. It gives immediate relief. It makes you feel like progress is real because somebody else can see it. But the second future is the one that compounds. It may not feel dramatic at first. It may not impress anyone. It may even make you feel like you are missing out. But every time you choose it, something invisible grows. Your margin grows. Your patience grows. Your ability to wait grows. Your ability to say no grows. Your ability to not explain yourself grows. And eventually, your life starts to feel less fragile. That is real progress, not the kind that begs for recognition, the kind that gives you back control. Because control is not about controlling everything. No one can do that. Markets change, jobs disappear, businesses slow down, people get sick, families need help, economies shift, plans fail, life interrupts. Control means you did not make yourself unnecessarily easy to break. That is the goal, not a perfect life. A less breakable life. A life where one bad month does not become a disaster. A life where one emergency does not throw you into humiliating debt. A life where one opinion does not make you spend to defend your ego. A life where one comparison does not rewrite your budget. A life where one raise does not automatically become a bigger cage. That kind of life is built before the crisis, before the pressure, before the moment where you wish you had saved. Before the moment where you wish you had not upgraded. Before the moment where you wish you had ignored the need to look successful. And that is why the next decision matters. Not the perfect plan. Not the fantasy version of yourself that will someday become disciplined. The next decision. The next time your ego wants to spend. The next time someone makes you feel behind. The next time a purchase looks like emotional rescue. The next time you are tempted to turn income into evidence. That is where the work happens. Not in theory. In the moment where the old pattern asks for your card. That moment will probably not feel heroic. It will feel small, maybe even disappointing. You will not buy the thing. You will not make the announcement. You will not get the reaction. You will not receive the little hit of recognition. You will just keep the money. And at first, that can feel like nothing. But it is not nothing. It is a vote for a different life. A vote against the invisible tax of needing to be seen. A vote for the future version of you who will need options more than applause. And those votes add up, slowly, quietly, without drama, until one day you realize that you are no longer living at the edge of your income. You are no longer as easy to provoke. You are no longer as hungry for proof. You are no longer as controlled by what other people think your life should look like. You still enjoy things. You still have desires. You still make mistakes. But you are not as owned by them. That is a form of wealth. Maybe not the kind that trends online, but the kind that changes how you breathe. You breathe differently when you have margin. You speak differently when you are not desperate. You negotiate differently when you can walk away. You rest differently when your life does not collapse without constant performance. You spend differently when money is not carrying the entire burden of your identity. This is where the conversation becomes deeper than personal finance, because the point is not simply to save more. The point is to stop using money to beg for a verdict about your worth. You do not need every purchase to testify for you. You do not need every upgrade to prove that you are becoming someone. You do not need your lifestyle to announce that you escaped your past. You can escape it more quietly than that. You can escape it by not repeating the same fear. You can escape it by not letting shame design your expenses. You can escape it by not letting comparison choose your goals. You can escape it by building a life that does not need to be defended with objects. That is a more powerful escape, less cinematic, more real. Because if you only escape poverty by entering performance, you did not fully escape. You changed the costume, but the anxiety stayed. You changed the symbols, but the dependence stayed. You changed the way people look at you, but you still need them to look. Real freedom begins when being seen is no longer the main proof that you exist. That is hard, especially if you spent years feeling unseen. If you grew up with limitations, if money was always a source of tension, if you watched others access rooms you could not enter, if you learned early that people treat you differently when they think you have less, those experiences leave marks. So when you finally have a little more, of course you may want the world to notice. That desire is human, but not every human desire deserves to become a financial structure. Some desires deserve compassion, not a loan. Some desires deserve attention, not a monthly payment. Some desires deserve healing, not a luxury brand. Some desires deserve a conversation with yourself, not another object that promises a new identity. That is the kind of honesty that protects you, because it does not shame the desire. It simply refuses to let the desire drive. You can say, I understand why I want this, and still say, this is not the right move. You can say, I understand why this status symbol attracts me, and still say, I will not trade my future for it. You can say, I understand why I want them to see me differently, and still say, their perception is too small a prize for my freedom. That sentence matters. Their perception is too small a prize for my freedom. Because perception is unstable. Today they admire. Tomorrow they forget. Today they envy. Tomorrow they criticize. Today they notice. Tomorrow they move on. If your financial life depends on unstable perception, your peace will be unstable too. So choose a better measure. Measure progress by how much your life needs less permission. Measure progress by how many months you can breathe. Measure progress by how little panic a problem creates. Measure progress by how many bad deals you can reject. Measure progress by how much of your income becomes future power instead of present performance. Measure progress by how few purchases are made to repair your ego. Measure progress by how much more honest your life feels. These measures are not as easy to show, but they are easier to live with. And in the long run, that matters more. Because you are the one who has to live inside the life you build. Not the people watching, not the people liking. Not the people commenting, not the people comparing. You live with the payments. You live with the stress. You live with the freedom. You live with the consequences. So build for the person who has to live there, not for the people passing by the window. That is one of the most important shifts you can make. Build inward before outward. Strengthen the inside before decorating the outside. Make the structure real before making the story visible. Let your progress develop roots before you hang lights on it. Because a life that grows outward too fast becomes heavy. A life that grows inward first becomes capable. Capable of handling more. Capable of enjoying more. Capable of giving more. Capable of choosing more. Capable of surviving more. Then, when you do spend, the spending is different. It does not come from panic. It does not come from hunger. It does not come from revenge. It does not come from a fragile need to be validated. It comes from fit, from usefulness. From enjoyment, from enoughness, from a foundation that can support the choice. That is how spending becomes clean. Not morally perfect, clean. It does not leave an emotional stain. It does not require a performance. It does not make you more dependent on being admired. It does not weaken your future. It belongs to you. That is the kind of spending worth having. Because money should not only be preserved, it should be used well. The goal is not to hoard every dollar until life becomes dry. That is another trap. Fear can disguise itself as discipline. Scarcity can disguise itself as wisdom. Avoidance can disguise itself as maturity. Some people become so afraid of losing money that they never let money serve life. That is not freedom either. Freedom is not never spending. Freedom is spending without being controlled. Saving without being afraid. Investing without worshiping numbers. Enjoying without needing an audience. Building without becoming bitter. Choosing without betraying your future. That balance is difficult, but it is the point. Because wealth without life becomes a cage, and life without structure becomes chaos. You need both. You need joy and margin, pleasure and discipline, beauty and resilience, ambition and enough, present and future. But the order matters. If pleasure always comes before structure, pleasure becomes expensive. If image always comes before foundation, image becomes dangerous. If ego always comes before freedom, ego becomes the owner of your life. So put freedom back in front, not as a slogan, as a filter. Before a purchase, ask, Does this give me more freedom, or does it only make me look freer? Does this support my real life or my public character? Does this reduce pressure or increase it with better packaging? Does this fit my values or my insecurity? Would I still choose it quietly? Would I still choose it without applause? Would I still choose it if nobody could use it to measure my success? Those questions are not meant to kill all desire. They are meant to purify desire, to separate what you actually want from what you want to be seen wanting. That separation can save your money, but it can also save your identity. Because when you stop buying proof, you start discovering preference. You find out what you actually like, not what signals status, not what your circle respects, not what your younger self imagined success must look like, not what social media presented as normal. What you like, what supports you, what gives you energy, what gives you peace, what makes your life more yours. That discovery is quiet, but it is powerful. Because a person who knows what they truly value is harder to sell nonsense to, harder to shame, harder to pressure, harder to pull into comparison, harder to recruit into lifestyles that do not fit. That person may still enjoy nice things, but the nice things are not in charge. That is the difference. Own things. Do not let things own the story of who you are. Use money. Do not let money become a costume for unresolved pain. Build status where it matters, if it truly helps. But do not sacrifice your inner freedom to rent a public identity. There is no peace there, only maintenance. And maintenance can consume a life, a little more each year, until you realize that your income grew, your possessions improved, your image got sharper, but your life did not become more yours. That is the warning. Do not let success make your life less yours. Do not let money become the reason you cannot move. Do not let income become a leash because expenses learned how to follow it. Do not let the world convince you that visible progress is the only progress. Some of the most important progress is silent. The month you did not panic, the offer you rejected, the debt you avoided, the savings you did not touch, the investment you made without telling anyone, the lifestyle you did not inflate, the old wound you did not let by another symbol, the status game you did not enter, the comparison you did not obey. These are not small things. They are the architecture of freedom, brick by brick. No audience required. And someday, when life tests you, those invisible bricks may matter more than every visible symbol you could have bought. They may give you time. They may give you patience. They may give you the ability to leave. They may give you the ability to help. They may give you the ability to recover. They may give you the ability to choose your next move without begging. That is what money can become when it is not constantly sacrificed to image. It can become room. Room to breathe. Room to think. Room to wait. Room to change. Room to become someone without having to perform that becoming for everyone else. And maybe that is the deepest form of wealth in this whole topic. Not being invisible. Not hiding. Not pretending to be less. But being so grounded that visibility is optional. You can be seen or not seen, praised or not praised, underestimated or admired, and you do not need to destroy your financial structure either way. That is quiet power. Because the person who needs applause can be controlled by applause. The person who needs status can be controlled by status. The person who needs comparison can be controlled by comparison. But the person who can build without constant recognition becomes harder to control, harder to sell to, harder to shame, harder to pressure, harder to trap. That is why the invisible path is not weak. It is strategic. It does not mean you never show anything. It means showing is no longer the engine. It does not mean you never buy nice things. It means nice things no longer decide your worth. It does not mean you never enjoy. It means enjoyment no longer needs a witness to feel real. It does not mean you reject ambition. It means ambition is no longer driven by humiliation. That is a cleaner life. Not easier, cleaner. Because when you remove the need to prove, many decisions become simpler. Not all. Life is still complicated. Money is still complicated. Responsibilities still exist. But one layer disappears. The layer of performance. And once that layer disappears, you can finally see the real question underneath. What kind of life am I actually trying to build? Not what looks good. Not what wins arguments. Not what signals success. Not what impresses people who do not carry my consequences. What life? A life with more time? More safety? More mobility? More creative freedom? More family presence? More health? More independence? More capacity to take risks? More ability to say no? Once you know that, many purchases reveal themselves. Some belong. Some do not. Some support the life. Some only support the image. Some are worth it. Some are just expensive noise. And expensive noise is one of the biggest threats to wealth, because it does not look like destruction. It looks like living. But if you listen closely, you can hear the difference. Real living leaves you fuller. Expensive noise leaves you needing another signal. Real living connects you to your life. Expensive noise connects you to an audience. Real living can be remembered privately. Expensive noise needs proof. Real living strengthens the person. Expensive noise strengthens the performance. Choose carefully, because over years, those choices become your life, not your intentions, not your explanations, not your motivational plans, your repeated choices. And if your repeated choices keep funding the image, do not be surprised when the image grows and freedom does not. But if your repeated choices fund the structure, something else happens. At first, not much, then a little space, then less panic, then more options, then more confidence, then more independence, then the ability to make decisions from preference instead of desperation, and eventually a quiet realization. You no longer need certain people to know how well you are doing, because you know, your life knows, your options know, your peace knows, your future knows. That is enough, and enough is powerful. Enough does not kill ambition. It makes ambition sane. Enough does not make you passive. It makes you less manipulable. Enough does not mean you stop growing. It means you stop bleeding money into a hole that cannot be filled by being seen. That hole requires another answer. Not a purchase, not a brand, not a monthly payment, not a photo, not a lifestyle. Another answer. Maybe self-respect, maybe healing, maybe purpose, maybe patience, maybe boundaries, maybe a new circle, maybe a new definition of success. Whatever it is, find it without handing your entire future to the marketplace. Because the marketplace will always have a solution to sell. But not every sold solution solves. Some only create the need for another one. That is how the wheel turns. Feel inadequate. Buy signal. Feel relief. Relief fades. Compare again. Buy again. Repeat. A person can spend decades inside that wheel and call it normal life. But it is not the only life available. You can step out. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But honestly. With the next decision, with the next pause, with the next time you choose not to convert insecurity into expense, with the next time you let money stay, with the next time you let someone misunderstand you, with the next time you choose future freedom over immediate recognition. That is where the invisible tax begins to disappear. The tax of proving, the tax of keeping up, the tax of being watched, the tax of defending an image, the tax of making sure nobody thinks you failed. The tax of living as if your life were always under review. You do not have to keep paying that tax, at least not forever, at least not without questioning it. So the next time you want to buy something because it would make your progress visible, do not attack yourself. Do not shame yourself. Do not pretend desire is evil. Just pause. Ask, do I want this because it improves my life, or because I want my life to be interpreted differently? Does this give me freedom, or does it demand performance? Would I choose this if nobody could see it? Am I buying a tool, an experience, a real pleasure, or am I buying witnesses? If the answer is uncomfortable, good. That discomfort may be the first honest moment in the whole transaction. And honest discomfort is better than expensive self-deception. Because the goal is not to look poor. The goal is not to hide. The goal is not to reject beauty, comfort, or joy. The goal is to stop paying for a version of success that makes you less free. Maybe your next level is not a more impressive purchase. Maybe your next level is needing less proof. Maybe your next level is building something nobody can easily measure. Maybe your next level is letting your life become stronger before it becomes louder. And if this kind of thinking makes sense to you, then this is probably not just another finance video for you. This is a different way of looking at money. Not as a trophy, not as a costume, not as revenge, not as proof, but as a tool for becoming harder to break. A tool for buying time, buying options, buying patience, buying the right to say no, buying a life that does not have to perform constantly to feel valid. That kind of wealth may not impress everyone, but it can save you. And one day, when you need room to breathe, the money you did not spend trying to impress people may be the money that gives you a way out. That is the quiet reward, not applause, not envy, not a perfect image. A way out, a choice, a pause, a door. And that door is worth more than many of the things people buy, so others will believe they are free. Because freedom does not become real when people believe it. It becomes real when your life can actually support it. So build that life. Quietly, if you have to. Slowly, if you must. Imperfectly, but honestly. Let the ego complain. Let the audience misunderstand. Let the old wound ask for another symbol. And then choose. Not always perfectly, but more consciously than before. Choose the structure. Choose the margin. Choose the future. Choose the kind of success that does not collapse when nobody applauds. Because looking like you made it can be expensive, but becoming free is worth protecting.